Hi, and welcome to Serenity Now, a place for entrepreneurs to ask questions, learn, get connected, and be inspired. Join us as we talk about all things business and the search for the ever-elusive Serenity Now in both business and personal life. In this episode of Serenity Now for Entrepreneurs, we chat about something that many companies have considered doing but aren't doing, firing a client. When do you consider taking this step?
We all have those clients where the relationship just isn't working. Everybody's annoyed and frustrated. And the more mature our business gets, the more we realize that maybe we just didn't have a really good discussion about what our expectations are and what the client's expectations are, and make sure that those things align.
Is there a point in time that you know this could be a challenging client to work with?
It's so exciting getting a client, of course. It's very exciting. But listening to your gut instinct, having that experience, and it's okay to say no.
Also in that discovery session, we also find out if they're coachable or not. You're coming to us for advice, and yet you're telling me what to do. You know, you try it a couple of times and say, maybe, they need to get it off their chest and they feel better. And I say, okay, let it out. But if you do this a few more times, then I'm going to say, well, perhaps we'll take a step back at this point.
Should this be an annual ritual?
We would have an annual client purging. And so we literally did, because we were getting to the point where we either had to grow, or we had to look at which clients were the biggest problem, taking the most time for the least amount of money.
And who should be involved? It's not a subjective exercise by any means.
But it was a really good system because everybody in the firm had a chance to contribute to it. And there were things that they knew about the client that I didn't know, like they promised to send something, and then follow up. And when they did, it was great, but it took us, 6 months to get them to send one thing.
So a decision has been made. How do you fire a client?
It's got to be a win-win. You got to be able to help them. If I can't help you move forward, why would I take your money?
Don't want to out and out say that you're fired, because what if later that person's at another company, or you gotta do it professionally, kindly, and sometimes
always respectfully.
Yeah.
There are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that may feel stuck or don't know how to move on from certain clients in their roster. Take a listen and learn how some business veterans have done this so that it can give you some serenity now. Welcome to this episode of Serenity Now for Entrepreneurs. We are going to be unpacking something that's a little bit unique, and we're going to start off with the title of How to Fire a Client. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening are like, what? Why would you fire a client? Or how would you fire a client? And at what point does it make sense to fire a client? And we're going to unpack that for everyone today, because it is something that we're seeing past COVID, through COVID, alignment of values, alignment of business. The business needs is changing quite a bit in the ecosystem. So it's really important to have the skills and also understand at what point we would recommend or look at firing our own clients, and what that really means. So Candace is actually an excellent Serenity sister to kick off this topic, because there's some changes happening in her business, in the firm. And so I'm going to kind of let you tell us a little bit of a story around what this hiring and firing a client, like what does that actually look like?
For sure. So I don't know. I wouldn't actually call it firing. I think it would be like a clarification of expectations. Is more along the lines, right? So we all have those. I don't know, especially if you're in a service provider, we all have those clients where the relationship just isn't working. Everybody's annoyed and frustrated, and the more mature our business gets, the more we realize that maybe we just didn't have a really good discussion about what our expectations are and what the client's expectations are, and make sure that those things align. So now what we're doing is we're really focusing on especially the relationships that don't seem to be going well, it is going back and having those conversations and making sure that what they're actually expecting from us is what we're able to provide to those clients. And where there's not an alignment, having a discussion about what that looks like. Okay, maybe we're not the service provider for you. Maybe you need to realign your expectations. Or maybe, we need to make a slight change in how we're servicing you to meet your expectations if that all works out. So I wouldn't say it's firing, and I think it's just that really deep analysis of what the expectations are. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Every once in a while, there's just a really, not, stellar individual that just needs to leave the office right away, and we've had those too. But I think there's ways of avoiding that. Actually, Nina, you mentioned the fire them before you hire them approach.
Well, when we were talking about this episode and like talking about firing clients, and this is probably because I've done this for 20 years. So it's a combination of gut instinct and just a lot of learning and experience of like when you're having those initial meetings with potential clients, it's like somebody's interested in your service, and we have a boutique marketing agency. You have to, in my case, I have to learn about the company and what it is that they do, to know that can we market them? Can we help them in some way? Now, the first question we ask is, who's your target market? And almost every company will say, but everybody would love my product. Everyone's my target market. And, of course, you're proud of what you do, and I get that. But if you don't have the budget for marketing worldwide to every single person on planet Earth, then we're not going to be able to do a good job for you. And so we have to really be able to see, like, okay, are we on the same page with this client? Are they asking us to market their brand new company where they have no experience as an award-winning best option in their industry? That can't happen. We can't market like that. We have to market authentically and honestly, truthfully. And so those are the things that help me decide of like, can we work with this person? And that vetting process is really important. It's so exciting getting a client, of course. It's very exciting. But listening to your gut instinct, having that experience, and it's okay to say no. Also, just sometimes somebody's demeanor, how they speak to you. If there's a little bit of a lack of respect, distrust, or they seem like they're not coachable in a sense, or not open to the concepts of marketing, traditional marketing. When you're the one that has the experience, they have no experience in marketing, but they're like, hey, this is how I want to do marketing. And you're like,
right.
Oh no, this is not going to work, right? Because they have their own ideas, but they're not going to let you use your expertise to help them. So that's how we weed out those people.
Mm-hmm.
Rita. Yeah, I'm going to tag along those pieces there, Nina. In our initial session with a client, we call it a discovery session. And it gives an opportunity for us, as well as the potential client, to get to know one another. And they might not like our demeanor either. They might not like how we want to look at things. So it gives them that opportunity, because we're very blunt, we're very straightforward. But some of the things that we look for in that discovery session is akin to what you said on marketing, but on the lending side. I kid you not, we have the most interesting discovery sessions. I had a guy who said, well, I know you can get me the money because you're good at it and you've got the reputation to do it. So what numbers do you want me to have? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I got the black book and I got the other book. So which one do you want?
No.
And I'm just like,
red flag.
So that got dialed out pretty quickly. I had an emergency, so I had to get off the call, and I never called them back. It's like, what the heck, So there are grounds, and like you talked about, ethics. Well, in the finance world, if we try to work with our partners in the industry with someone who's not ethical, immoral, doing illegal stuff, working with, countries that, we can't work with, those are easy ones for us to kind of say we might not be the right choice for you for this particular project, and take a step back. But also in that discovery session, we also find out if they're coachable or not. You're coming to us for advice, and yet you're telling me what to do. And, you'd try it a couple of times and say, maybe, they need to get it off their chest and they feel better. And I say, okay, let it out. But if you do this a few more times, and I'm going to say, well, perhaps we'll take a step back at this point. So that's just on the initial discovery, before you hire a client. And for Partners for Growth, it's going to sound really strange. Our stats are 80% no for all clients. So there's very few that actually make it past discovery. So
it's interesting.
And Peggy, you've got a really cool system. So if you have clients and then if they don't fit.
Well, I had a different situation where I was a little bit separated for operations because I had a staff, much like what Steph has. And although I dealt with the clients on one level, they would deal sometimes with my staff differently. So we would have an annual client purging. And so we literally did, because we were getting to the point where we either had to grow or we had to look at which clients were the biggest problem, taking the most time for the least amount of money, and fee wise. So we actually had a grid system where we would rate our fee level with that client from A to D. D being the smallest fees, and then we would rate the client from 1 to 3. So they might be an A1 client because they were a larger fee client and absolutely great to deal with and paid well, and things moved along well. As well for us, we also rated in their science, because sometimes with weak shred claims, they can be the best people in the world and they can pay well and everything. But if the science is weak, then we're kind of, we're at risk with CRA. So we use that grid system, and every year we'd sit down, and one year we went from 130 claims, our clients, we took it right down to 100 because we found a big group of them in the D category. And so we made it a policy. If you were in D, which would have been, small enough fee, and you were a D1 and it just went through zippity quick, then we kept you. But if you were a D2 or D3, you were gone, and we politely just did not contact you again. And if they did call, then we had to either talk about a different fee, or we wouldn't take you on if you were in that D3 category. We also did it with the C category as costs, grew. And we looked at the people in that C category and said, this is an iffy one. If you're a C1, you get to stay. If you're a C2 or C3, we kind of looked individually at those ones that decided. But it was a really good system because everybody in the firm had a chance to contribute to it. And there were things that they knew about the client that I didn't know, like they promised to send something, and then follow up. And when they did, it was great, but it took us, 6 months to get them to send one thing.
Right.
Whereas, and that takes time, that takes effort. Go ahead, Candace.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Peggy, I on the point of involving your staff in the process, I think that's a really good thing. I think our firm early on, we didn't really involve our staff or empower our staff to make judgment calls on whether we should accept a client or not, or even give them a frame of reference as to what that might look like. And we're working on that more now. Because you're right, the staff often know more than we do, and usually, and not always, but sometimes they're younger. They don't have the experience or the confidence to tell a client no. So I think involving them with the process is really important so that they get that experience and the confidence and the framework into understanding which clients meet the criteria and which clients just don't.
So then the next thing that you have to look at is, once you've determined which clients you're going to keep and which ones you're going to release, it's a question of how to do it. And, the how to can be as easy as upping their price. That will often send some of those ones that I talked about in the, the bottom category. That'll send them packing right away. And then other ones, we just didn't recontact them. And it was bad parting. We just didn't seek them out. They didn't seek us out. So it was a happy ending. But there are times when you have to literally tell a client, I can't do your claims anymore. So Candace, did you have that experience? I think you were telling us earlier about some clever letter or something that you drafted, or Wasn't it you?
Possibly, but I can't remember the content of the letter right now. But I mean, there was one client where we just told them that as of a certain date, we weren't, COVID brought along lots of changes,
that was
and as of a certain date, we weren't going to be able to do the rec. Didn't say that we were, suffering from COVID. We just basically implied that COVID has caused a bunch of changes, and therefore we couldn't do their work anymore. I just let them make whatever assumptions that they wanted to
and
make.
I think that was partly why I brought that up, is because you don't want to out and out say that you're fired, because what if later that person's at another company, or you gotta do it professionally, kindly, and sometimes
always respectfully.
Yeah.
You can end things on good terms. It's always a good thing. The one thing that I would say is sometimes somebody seems like an ideal client in the beginning, but Peggy, you were saying that people, they won't send you their stuff. Like, as a service provider, you're reliant on what the client gives you. Like, for marketing, building a website, I need content. I need information. And so we have had a couple of times where people are like, you didn't meet our deadlines, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you didn't this is 3 months of emails. Like, we've been asking you. There's no way to meet the deadlines if you don't answer questions, if you're not looking at the draft website, if you're not giving us what we need to move forward. And so in those situations, you just have to reevaluate and say, look, let's revise the timelines. Yeah. Can we work together? Are you able to get us this? Do we need to do this in phases? Try to decide if you can move forward or not, and give the client the option of like, hey, do you want to keep working together? Do you want to move forward? Do you think, a really good question is, do you think this is working? And then just listen. I do that with staff too.
and then the other thing is, when you have that conversation, then you can bring up, here are the things that we need to change to make this work.
Right.
Yeah. And it's a wonderful conversation to have. I'd like to say that those happen a lot, but genuinely, they don't happen that much. Yeah. I find that once you encounter that kind of a client, you often just have to walk away. A tiger doesn't change its stripes, and it's just sometimes it's just not going to work.
I do find, though, with the changes that have been happening in the business ecosystem in the last couple of years, it's not always a, bad client in the way that they are mean to your staff, or that they're disrespectful or take advantage of different things. It really could just be that their changes changes in their business has resulted in them not being an ideal client for you. And so those are the conversations that I find I'm having a little bit more, is we don't want to be, asking you, are you hiring people? Are you training? Are you expanding into markets? And what you're actually doing this year is, we're just kind of laying low and seeing where things stand. Well, there's no point in having a consultant helping and looking into grants for you if those are not the activities that you're going to be doing. And I think that the challenge often is the loyalty, because maybe that client has been with you for 5 years. Or maybe, that there's opportunities to help them once they're ready to go. So I think it really is very necessary to have a very transparent conversation and part ways in a very amicable way, and understand that letting them go is actually helping them. They then save that annual fee that you would be charging, or the minimum that you would require. And that's not really where they need to be putting their efforts right now. It might just be determining kind of where their business is going and prioritizing activities within the business. So I think that there's also that side of firing client. Obviously, there's the unreasonable, entitled clients that might not be a fit for your values. But there's also these other ones where you have to make an educated decision whether or not you're able to serve them. And because we are a service-based business, right? We're not one of these like, oh, sign on and, we just renew you without telling you. And then you just keep paying us. Like, I think the values alignment really needs to be there. And if you have suppliers or companies that are charging in that way, and they're just kind of hiding the cost and you're not getting the service, it's sometimes hard to find that, it's hidden in the books. And so making sure that as a service provider, you're also reviewing what is the impact that you're making on your client base. So just a couple of, thoughts on that end. I'd love to do a quick quick fire on this one, and go around the table and just ask a little bit of either best practices on the firing a client side or anything that you've learned in the session, with another Serenity sister, or something that you forgot to add in.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm just going to kind of repeat myself, know who your client is and stick to the plan. And because if you know who your client is and what service you can provide, you're going to keep those clients happy and eliminate the clients that don't fit into that mold. I think that's probably the most important to me.
Yeah, Nina.
So it has to be a win-win for both the client and for yourself. So just like keeping that in mind, and if things are changing for the client or yourself, then that's when you have to reevaluate things and have those good conversations. I will caution on the pain in the ass fees that some companies do. Like, this client's a pain in the ass, so they have a different fee. I don't know if it's worth it. So just be cautious on that. Right. And then also be cautious on the clients that are startups that are saying, hey, I'm coming to you and I just have a really small budget. You just have to figure out what clients you can take on, what you can really provide them, and find that target market that's a fit for you, where you're going to be able to give them the service or product that they need, and it's a win for you and it's a win for them. If you are firing somebody, I just do want to add that sleep on it, think about it. Do not send quick emails where you're writing angry emails, or write the angry email, save it as a draft.
Yes.
Talk to the people you work with, edit, and just really, sometimes it is frustrating, but it's not worth it. I find that it's not worth it to send emails with a lot of emotion or anger. Just look at solutions, look at options, and focus on that. Where do you want to go? What is the end goal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Rita.
I'm just going to echo what everyone else is saying. For us, we have a really, really tough vetting process in our discovery session. Just to even get to us, it has to be done through referral. And then the second step is a discovery session with Rita. Now, with anyone else, you have to actually go through me. Right. And in that discovery session, we have very key questions that we ask, and understanding of some red flags that I might understand better than others, which is why I have to take those. So having that process laid out for your firm, for your company, because you know what works good and how you're going to be able to service that company or not be able to. So the matching piece, it's got to be a win-win. You got to be able to help them. If I can't help you move forward, why would I take your money? One other piece is there comes a time, sometimes in the life of a business, where you end up with a client that has gone way far off, to the deep end, and there can be some legal concerns or reputational risk. And at that point, you can and or may need to involve a lawyer. And I've had to do that a couple of times, not many because of our vetting process. I think we're getting better, but there are some that's, sneak in and things change and who knows. Mm-hmm. But we've had our lawyers handle those pieces and those clients. And so the letter gets issued by them. But again, you have to be able to be comfortable with being able to say, I might need to get some external help. When you feel that risk is too high in your gut, reach out. Your lawyer will be happy. You will be happy, and they will handle the whole thing for you on your behalf. So it's okay on that side as well. So there are extremes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Peggy.
Well, I just think that it's prudent for a business to annually review the clients, and realizing that getting clients off the table that draw on resources and don't contribute hugely to fees, and those two things together particularly are a bad combination, it actually frees you to do better projects. And that is really important to analyze, where is it? And not just from a profit point of view, but just from a employee satisfaction point of view too. Get those headaches off the table. Get those clients out of the books that really don't contribute to the profitability of the company, but draw heavily on resources. And when you free up, like one year we freed up 30 of 130 clients. It left us available to do good work. It left us available to take on new clients, and it didn't pull the team down because of those bad apples, I would say.
Yeah. I'm just going to add as a newer entrepreneur, because we might have some listeners who are newer. And it's really interesting because when you first start out, and I did this as well as service-based business, you just take everyone. So you don't know any better.
Yeah.
And you need to keep the business going. And so you're like, here's an opportunity here. This absolutely could be something, like Peggy mentioned, you could be reviewing on an annual basis, and you may not be able to pull the trigger on all of the clients that aren't a perfect fit until you've got a flow of clients that are a little bit better. And I will say that by putting out there, what is that ideal client that you have, you're then attracting the clients that are a match for the values that you believe in and the size of company that you're working on. And so just making sure that you are, you're not panicking from the start and listening to this as a startup or, early in your business and going, oh, geez, I got to really not do this. Well, revenues are important.
Yeah.
And some of these lessons are learned. And there's also ways that you can train your client and have a conversation. We do quarterly check-ins now. So we are advising on a quarterly basis. If there isn't a touch point in between the quarters, we know at least every 3 months we're touching base. And so at that point, it's like, hey, we've noticed this. Is everything okay? And sometimes it's really important not to make assumptions as well. Oh, they're not replying me because they must hate me. And it's like, no. They're not replying you because they have COVID.
Yeah.
Or they're not replying you because, there's a fire that needs to be put out. And so I think that is a very knee-jerk reaction. And also hearing the other side of the story is probably what I would mention as well. So startups, don't worry too much. Have an idea of who you want to serve and move in that direction. But don't feel like you have to have all the answers right away. That's absolutely not what we're saying here.
I think I really want to add really quick for startups, and I've seen this a lot in business forums that I belong to and Facebook groups about business, is that, people are asking, business owners are asking, what do I do when somebody doesn't pay me? Well, you can't keep them as a client, right?
Yes.
It's not your job to finance a client's business. So you really have to be cautious. That's a huge red flag. If the bills don't start, if they're not getting paid, you have to address it immediately. And money is always a tricky thing when you're first starting out as an entrepreneur. Like, nobody likes those conversations, but you have to get comfortable real quick talking about that. If you have a fee structure in place and they're not meeting those obligations, you have to have that conversation.
I think that's the content of another podcast.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
Agreed.
We are one mind. I think all of us were like, oh, that's a good one. Again, on behalf of the Serenity sisters, we hope you got some really good learning from this. Variety of different points were brought up in terms of how to identify a good fitting client. How would you have a conversation? How do you do it respectfully? And also, how do you rank clients? And I think Peggy had such a good method, and we've adopted it at Granted. It's R&D, called rip off and duplicate, not research and implementation. So with that, please feel free to share this podcast with someone who might be struggling with this. You never know when, by sharing these tips and these tricks and different things that we are wanting entrepreneurs that are listening to be successful. And so sharing our learnings is hopefully able to pass on our knowledge and our experiences as well. So we'd love for that. And the reason is because we want to bring serenity to entrepreneurs. That is why we are Serenity, Serenity for all entrepreneurs. So we really want to thank you for listening in, and please feel free to comment on things, or maybe if you have a story, leave out the names, but maybe you want to share something. So feel free to do that. And again, we are excited to do another episode, possibly on, how to work on some of these details that we talked about earlier. So we'll probably touch base on that as well, because this is definitely difficult to have an episode in 30 minutes talking about such a big topic. Have a great night. We hope you enjoyed this episode and picked up some good tips and best practices that would benefit your entrepreneurial journey. Remember, none of the content in this podcast should be relied upon as standard legal or business advice. Always consult a professional for your specific business. You may know someone who could benefit from this podcast. Please share it with your business community, and perhaps it can give an entrepreneur you know some serenity now.